Do you know Steve Jobs practiced Zen Buddhism to improve his creativity? In 1974, Steve Jobs traveled to India with his college friend Daniel Kottke to find spiritual answers and a deeper understanding of life.
Steve and I became friends in 1972 as freshmen in college. We went to India in 1974.
While in India, Jobs explored different spiritual teachings, including Zen Buddhism, which emphasizes clearing the mind.
A clear mind. That's what I believe in.
Focusing on what truly matters.
Your job is to pick the one thing that actually matters.
And inspiring creativity.
We are delivering today the iPad, the new iMac, the iPod, iPhoto, MacBook Air, iTunes.
When he returned to the United States, Jobs used what he learned in India to guide his work. He embraced simplicity and mindfulness, which became the foundation of Apple's product designs like the iPhone and MacBook.
It's turning out to be the way we're running the company, the advertising, the product design. We're just trying to get simple again.
These products became known for being simple and easy to use. Jobs once said, "That's been one of my mantras, focus and simplicity. Simple can be harder than complex. You have to work hard to get your thinking clean to make it simple, but it's worth it in the end because once you get there, you can move mountains." Today, Apple's products are still known for their clean, elegant designs. Don't complicate things. Keep it simple. If you've been here before, drop a hashtag Believe in the comments below so I can feature you here in a future video. And if you're new, welcome to Believe Nation, the only channel that helps you believe in yourself daily, one video at a time. Believe. Many people think Steve Jobs built Apple just by being a genius with computers. That's a completely false idea. The real secret to the massive success of Apple started in a dusty, incredibly hot village in India. It was the year 1974. Steve Jobs was only 19 years old. He was broke. He was barefoot. He was covered in lice. He did not care about circuit boards or writing computer code. He only cared about finding the true meaning of life. He traveled all the way across the world to find a famous spiritual guru. When he finally got to the village, he learned the guru was already dead. He felt completely lost and devastated. But that massive disappointment forced him to look inside his own mind instead of looking for outside help. That specific failure created the exact foundation for the iPhone, the MacBook, and a company worth trillions of dollars. This is the deep story of how Steve Jobs used ancient Zen Buddhism to build the future and how you can use his exact mindset to grow your own business. The Great Escape to India. Steve Jobs was not a normal teenager. He dropped out of Reach College because it cost his parents too much money. He felt very guilty spending their life savings on classes that he didn't even care about. He did not have a dorm room of his own. He slept on the hard floor in the rooms of his friends. He was so poor that he returned empty glass Coke bottles for 5 cents just to buy food for the week. He walked across town to eat free meals at the local Hare Krishna temple every single Sunday. During this time, he read a famous book called Be Here Now by Ram Dass. This book completely changed his brain. He decided he wanted to experience deep spiritual enlightenment. He wanted to actually feel it in his bones, not just read about it in a college library. So he got a low-level job at a video game company called Atari. He worked the night shift because he rarely showered and walked around the office without any shoes on. He saved every single penny he made. He convinced his good college friend Daniel Kottke to travel to India with him. They wanted to find a specific spiritual teacher named Neem Karoli Baba. They truly believed this holy man would give them all the secret answers to life and fix their confused minds. The harsh reality of the search. India was absolutely nothing like Steve Jobs expected. It was not a quiet, peaceful, easy place. It was extremely loud, highly crowded, and incredibly hot. The very moment he stepped off the airplane in New Delhi, the intense heat hit him like a solid brick wall. There were poor beggars everywhere he looked. People were starving in the dirty streets. He and Daniel wore very cheap local clothes to blend in. They traveled across the massive country on terribly crowded, filthy trains. They walked for miles and miles in the burning hot sun. The journey was physically brutal. Steve actually got very sick along the way. He called a terrible disease called dysentery from drinking the local water. He was stuck in a tiny bed with a dangerously high fever for days. He lost a massive amount of weight. He even asked a local barber to shave his head completely bald just to deal with the intense heat and the bugs. He was physically weak and exhausted, but the absolute biggest blow of the trip was still waiting for him. After many long weeks of hard travel, they finally reached the specific ashram of Neem Karoli Baba. They walked right up to the front gates with hope in their hearts. The people standing there told them the great guru had actually died several months earlier. Steve was completely crushed. He had traveled halfway across the planet for absolutely nothing. There was no magic man waiting to give him the answers to the universe. The massive shift to Zen. Steve Jobs had a giant realization in that quiet, dusty village. He realized that famous inventors like Thomas Edison did not find their great ideas by asking a guru on a mountain. He realized you cannot just pay a holy man to give you a clear mind. You have to build a clear, strong mind all by yourself. So he stopped looking for the magic tricks and started looking closely at his own passing thoughts. He spent the next 7 months wandering all around India. He watched very closely how the local village people lived their daily lives. He noticed that these poor people did not use cold logic in the way Americans did back home. They used deep intuition. They trusted their gut feelings above everything else. Steve decided right then that human intuition was much more powerful than pure cold intellect. When he finally returned to the United States, he was a completely different person. He wore traditional Indian robes around town. He still walked around without shoes. Normal people thought he was totally crazy, but his young mind was sharper and clearer than it had ever been. He started heavily studying Zen Buddhism back in California. He went to a special center and met a real Zen monk named Kobun Chino Otogawa. They spent many long hours together in silence. Steve learned exactly how to sit perfectly still. He learned how to watch his thoughts pass like clouds without judging them. He learned how to deeply focus his brain on one single thing and completely ignore all the distracting noise around him. Bringing ancient Zen to the circuit board. Steve Jobs took this deep, quiet spiritual training and brought it straight into the loud, messy business world. Most personal computers in the late 1970s were extremely ugly. They were giant, heavy metal boxes with messy wires hanging out everywhere. They looked highly complicated. They made normal, everyday people feel stupid and afraid. The smart engineers who built them only cared about raw computer power. They didn't care at all about how the machine actually felt to the user. Steve cared deeply about the feeling. Zen Buddhism taught him the extreme value of empty space and pure simplicity. He fully believed the computer should feel just like a clean, quiet, empty room. It should calm your mind down, not stress you out. When he and his friend Steve Wozniak built the Apple II computer, Steve Jobs obsessed over the plastic outside case. He wanted it to look friendly and inviting to a normal family. He wanted the color to be a perfect, calm beige. He even cared deeply about the hidden inside parts of the computer. He aggressively forced the Apple engineers to make the tiny circuit board lines perfectly straight and beautiful. The engineers pushed back. They told them no customer would ever open the box and see the inside. Steve told them that a truly great carpenter does not use rotten, ugly wood on the back of a nice cabinet, even if no one ever sees it. He demanded total purity all the way through the machine. Also, if you want to take real action, after this video, I made a free worksheet just for you. It covers the top lessons from today, gives you space to write your biggest takeaways, and helps you build a simple action plan. It's 100% free. Just click the link in the description, go grab it. I'll see you there. The incredible power of saying no. The absolute core idea of Zen is stripping away all the unnecessary things. It's about actively removing everything until only the absolute truth remains. Because of his time in India, Steve Jobs became the ultimate editor in the business world. When he returned to run Apple in 1997, the company was heavily dying. They were losing millions of dollars. They had dozens and dozens of different confusing products. They sold many different versions of the Macintosh computer. They sold printers. They sold scanners. It was a massive, confusing mess. There was zero focus. Steve walked right into a big meeting and drew a very simple grid on the whiteboard. It only had 4 empty squares. He told the room that Apple would only make 4 computers from now on. They would make 1 desktop for normal people, 1 desktop for smart professionals, 1 laptop for normal people, and 1 laptop for smart professionals. He completely killed hundreds of different projects in a single afternoon. People, they were shocked. Many people lost their jobs that day. But Steve knew from his Zen training that you cannot be great if you are doing too many things at once. You have to clear the clutter from your room before you can think clearly. The ultimate daily mantra. This specific clear mindset created the biggest consumer electronics revolution in human history. Think deeply about the very first Apple iPod. Other digital music players on the market back then had 20 different small buttons. They were very hard and frustrating to use. Steve Jobs looked at those old designs and he hated them. He ordered his Apple team to remove all the buttons. He wanted people to be able to get any specific song in just 3 easy clicks. This strict demand seemed totally impossible to the smart engineers, but it forced them to invent the famous round click wheel. The iPod had no on-off switch at all. It just smoothly woke up when you touched it. It quietly went to sleep when you left it alone. It was pure Zen philosophy placed right into your pocket. Steve Jobs perfectly explained his exact mindset in a very famous business interview. He said, "That has been one of my mantras, focus and simplicity. Simple can be harder than complex. You have to work hard to get your thinking clean to make it simple, but it is worth it in the end because once you get there, you can move mountains." Lesson 1. Go outside your bubble. So now let's break down how you can use the Steve Jobs Zen method in your own business. The very first lesson is to stop looking for answers inside your own specific industry. If Steve Jobs only studied other computers, Apple would have looked exactly like old IBM computers. He would have built boring, heavy, gray boxes. Instead, he studied Eastern philosophy in India. He studied the art of calligraphy. He walked through quiet apple orchards. You need to feed your own brain with totally different inputs. If you own a local landscaping business, don't just read boring landscaping magazines. Read books about luxury 5-star hotels to learn about amazing customer service. Read old books about human psychology to clearly understand human behavior. The absolute best business ideas happen when you connect two completely different worlds together. When you bring strange outside knowledge into your specific field, you become a category of one. Nobody can ever copy you because nobody has your unique mix of life experience. So don't just study your rivals, study art, history, nature. You will build a deep well of unique inspiration for your business. Lesson number 2, make it painfully simple. The second deep lesson here is that you must be the strict editor for your customers. Your customers are very tired. They are highly overwhelmed by modern life. They have way too many choices hitting them every single day. If your company website is even slightly confusing, they will leave immediately. If your physical product requires a long instruction manual, they will get angry and return it. If your sales pitch has 20 different confusing points, they will completely tune you out. You must do the very hard work of making things incredibly simple. This takes massive, painful effort behind the scenes. It's very easy to add more features to a product. It's incredibly difficult to take features away. So look at your current business right now. Figure out what you can remove today. Think about what confusing steps you can cut out of your checkout process. Find the extra words you can delete from your website homepage. Make your product or service so incredibly simple that a very tired person can use it without thinking at all. When you remove all the friction, your sales will explode. Remember that true simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. Lesson 3, trust your inner gut. The third and final lesson here is to fully trust your intuition. We live in a modern world that is completely obsessed with cold data. People want massive spreadsheets for every single decision. They want to run endless focus groups. They want to ask 100 different people for their opinion before they ever launch a new product. Steve Jobs hated focus groups. He firmly believed it is not the job of the customer to know what they want. Data can only tell you what already happened in the past. It absolutely cannot tell you what to build for the future. You have to spend real time in pure silence. You have to learn meditation or go for long, quiet walks without looking at your phone. You need to let your busy mind settle down. When the muddy water of your mind finally gets calm, you can see all the way to the clear bottom. That is exactly where your absolute best ideas live. You actually already know what the right move is for your business right now. You just have way too much noise in your head to hear the answer. So block out the loud noise, trust your inner voice. It is the most powerful business tool you will ever have. And congratulations, you're one video closer to who you're meant to be. Believe. Now let's break down Apple's success and make sense of Steve Wozniak's influence. Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak quietly gave away $10 million of his own stock to reward early Apple employees who had been left out of the company's riches. In 1980, when Apple went public, some of the garage team that built Apple didn't receive stock options, a decision largely made by Steve Jobs. Wozniak felt this was unfair, so he created the Woz Plan, personally offering chunks of his shares at a nominal price to around 80 Apple staff who had missed out. Those employees suddenly benefited from Apple's IPO boom thanks to Woz's generosity. He did it simply because it was the right thing. This act of kindness was virtually unheard of in Silicon Valley, where founders rarely give up their own equity. But Wozniak valued the contributions of everyone who helped build Apple's success, and he literally shared the wealth with them. As Wozniak said, "I gave about $10 million of my own stock to them because it was the right thing." Why some early Apple employees were left out. When Apple had its initial public offering in December 1980, not everyone who helped build the company was rewarded. Steve Jobs and Apple's board decided that only certain employees qualified for stock options. Many early team members, the folks who had worked with Jobs and Wozniak in the garage, ended up with nothing. A prime example was Daniel Kottke, one of Apple's first employees and a close college friend of Jobs. Despite Kottke's contributions, he helped build and test Apple's first computers. Jobs did not consider him worthy of stock. Kottke later recalled how he tried to talk to Jobs about it, but was repeatedly ignored. At one point, another Apple executive even offered to give Kottke some of his own shares if Jobs would match the gesture. Jobs' response was ice cold. "Okay, I will give him 0. This meant Jobs refused to give Kottke any stock at all. For dedicated early employees like Kottke, who had put their heart and soul in Apple, being shut out of the IPO riches felt like a betrayal. Jobs' hardline stance left a number of loyal Apple employees disappointed and demoralized. They had worked tirelessly to build Apple's products and culture, only to see others get wealthy overnight while Apple's stock skyrocketed. Apple's IPO was a huge success. It made Steve Jobs and other executives extremely rich. But people like Kottke, Bill Fernandez, who was Apple's very first employee, Chris Espinosa, another early Apple employee, and others received no stock and thus no share of the wealth. This situation didn't sit right with Apple's other co-founder, Steve Wozniak. Wozniak believed it was wrong to leave out members of the team who had contributed during Apple's startup years. He saw it as unfair that only a select few would benefit financially, while many early contributors were left empty-handed. The Woz Plan. Wozniak shares the wealth. Wozniak decided to fix this inequity himself. In an extraordinary move, he came up with what became known as the Woz Plan. Under this plan, Wozniak personally offered some of his own shares to the early Apple employees who had been denied stock options. He did this quietly and without a ton of fanfare. It was a personal mission for him to do the right thing, not a public stunt. In early 1981, shortly after Apple went public, Wozniak allowed around 40 to 80 of these early employees to purchase a chunk of his own Apple stock at a nominal price of just $5 per share. Each of those staff members was allowed to buy up to 2,000 shares from Wozniak at this dirt cheap price. At the time, Apple's IPO price had been around $22 per share on the open market. So Wozniak was essentially giving them a massive discount. In practical terms, Woz was reaching into his own pocket to gift approximately $10 million worth of stock to his colleagues. This was stock he could have sold for a fortune, but instead he chose to share it with those who had helped build the company. Those early Apple employees who participated in the Woz Plan suddenly found themselves holding valuable stock that could change their lives. Thanks to Wozniak's generosity, people like Kottke, Fernandez, Espinosa, Randy Wigington, another early Apple engineer, and others finally got to share in Apple's success. Many of them purchased the shares from Wozniak at $5 each, and immediately those shares were worth several times more on the market. As Apple grew over the years, the value of those stocks exploded. In fact, Apple stock split multiple times, and by 2021, a single Apple share from 1980 had split into 224 shares and would be worth tens of thousands of dollars. In other words, Wozniak's gift of stock made a huge financial impact on the lives of the roughly 80 people he helped. Some of these people who had been left out of the IPO suddenly became wealthy, or at least far better off than before, all because Wozniak decided to share his wealth. Wozniak carried out the Woz Plan very quietly. He didn't seek any publicity or praise for it at the time. In fact, many people didn't even know this happened until years later when the story eventually came to light. Even Hollywood missed the memo. In the 2015 film Steve Jobs and other dramatizations of Apple's history, this remarkable act of generosity wasn't shown. Wozniak himself noted that he was surprised the filmmakers chose not to include his $10 million stock giveaway. But Woz never did it for the recognition. He did it because he felt it was the right thing to do. Why Wozniak did it? It was the right thing. What drove Steve Wozniak to give away such a large chunk of his personal stake in Apple? In simple terms, Wozniak did it out of a sense of fairness, loyalty, and gratitude. He later explained his reasoning in interviews, shedding light on his values. Wozniak remembered that in Apple's early days, there were only about 5 people who ran the company for the first 3 years. And as a result, those few people held almost all the stocks. When Apple went public and the stock's value skyrocketed, Woz felt deeply uncomfortable that only this small group would get rich, while dozens of other employees who had been with them from the garage days would get nothing. Everybody who'd been around and helped Apple in the beginning was a part of its success in Wozniak's view, and they deserved a share in that success. It's important to note Wozniak's background. He came from Hewlett-Packard, where he had worked before co-founding Apple. At HP, there was a tradition of profit sharing and employee stock ownership. Wozniak recalled that HP would distribute a portion of profits to employees and even give out stock so that employees felt like owners of the company. And this had a big influence on him. Wozniak strongly believed that a company's employees should feel ownership and should be rewarded when the company does well. To him, this was just basic fairness and good practice. He once said that he felt this so strongly that when Apple's IPO happened, he simply didn't feel right keeping all the rewards confined to the founders. Wozniak wanted to spread the wealth to those who had worked hard alongside him. So, acting on his belief, Wozniak gave away a lot of his stock to almost everybody in the company in marketing and engineering jobs, essentially to the people who had helped build Apple's products and growth. He didn't stop there. Woz also gave large amount of shares to a few key young people who weren't official employees but had been crucial in Apple's early days. Some of these were local kids or high school students who had hung around Apple and contributed, for example, by writing code or offering technical help when Apple was just starting out. Wozniak said these young enthusiasts helped inspire him and even wrote software with him in the early days. I wouldn't have gotten to where I got to without them, Wozniak admitted, emphasizing that those contributors deserve to own a part of Apple too. And this speaks volumes about Wozniak's character. He genuinely valued every contribution, no matter how big or small, and he never saw Apple's success as solely his own. To Woz, Apple's achievements were a team effort, and so the rewards should be shared with the team. He has often said that giving those employees a share of the company was simply the fair and right thing to do. A virtually unheard of act of kindness in Silicon Valley. Wozniak's $10 million giveaway stands out as an extraordinary act of kindness, especially in Silicon Valley's competitive culture. In the world of tech startups, founders almost never give up their personal equity voluntarily. Founders and early investors usually hold on to as many shares as possible, since those shares translate into wealth and control. The norm is to reward employees with stock only through formal stock option plans or bonuses, and often only key employees get significant shares. What Wozniak did, personally sacrificing a portion of his own stake to thank early employees, was virtually unheard of at the time. It broke the Silicon Valley mold. Wozniak received no pressure to do this from anyone. Apple's board certainly didn't ask him to do it. In fact, the board had decided against giving those employees shares. No, this was purely Wozniak's initiative, driven by his generous heart. And to put it in perspective, imagine another famous tech founder like Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg handing over 10 million of their own shares to early employees just because they felt it was fair. It's hard to picture, right? That's one reason Steve Wozniak is so respected and beloved in the tech community. He prioritized people over profit. While Steve Jobs was known for his intense focus on products and sometimes ruthless business decisions, Wozniak was known for his warmth and generosity. Woz once said that making Apple successful was not just about technology or money for him, it was about the people who built the company together. He believed in loyalty and doing good by those who were loyal to Apple. Wozniak's act of sharing the wealth had a lasting impact on Apple's culture as well. It sent a message that everyone's contributions mattered. Early Apple employee Randy Wigington once noted that Wozniak cared deeply about the well-being of the team and never acted as if he was above anyone else. By giving away part of his fortune to his colleagues, Wozniak essentially said, "We did this together, so we should all benefit." This fostered a sense of family and loyalty within the early Apple team. Many of those who benefited from the Woz Plan remain grateful to Wozniak for life. Decades later, Steve Wozniak is still often described as the heart of Apple's founding story, the kind, principled engineer who valued people as much as products. It's also telling that Wozniak never regretted giving up that $10 million in stock. By today's value, those shares would be worth hundreds of millions of dollars or more. But for Woz, it was never about the money. He famously said, "I didn't ever want to be rich." And even after Apple's success, he lived relatively modestly and focused on engineering and teaching rather than accumulating more wealth. Wozniak eventually left day-to-day operations at Apple in 1985, but he remained an employee in a symbolic capacity and continued to inspire Apple's culture of creativity and friendliness. His generous spirit carried on in various philanthropic efforts. For example, Wozniak has donated a lot to education and even funded technology programs in schools. Sharing and helping others is just part of who he is. The legacy of Wozniak's generosity. Steve Wozniak's decision to share $10 million of his own stock with early Apple employees is far more than just a footnote in tech history. It's a powerful lesson in leadership, in fairness, and humility. In doing so, Wozniak showed that true success isn't just about personal gain. It's about lifting others up with you. His generosity ensured that the people who labored in Apple's early days, when success was far from guaranteed, were not forgotten when the company hit it big. This act of kindness has become a legendary story, illustrating that doing the right thing often matters more in the long run than any extra money or credit you might keep for yourself. The Woz Plan story is a reminder that empathy and fairness can exist even in the business world. When you recognize and reward the contributions of others, you cultivate trust, loyalty, and a sense of shared purpose. These qualities can be far more valuable than money alone. As the saying goes, success means little if you don't lift others up along the way. Steve Wozniak lifted others up in a very tangible way. He didn't have to. He gained nothing material by doing it, but he did it because it was right. In a world where we often hear about fierce competition and self-interest, Wozniak's story shows that kindness and business success are not mutually exclusive. You can be incredibly successful and still stay true to your values and treat people with generosity and respect. Wozniak once summed up his action simply by saying he did it because it was the right thing to do. And that single quote encapsulates his philosophy. He believed doing good for others is success in itself. So think about how you can apply this principle in your own life or business. How can you share your wealth, knowledge, or success with those around you? Remember, when you help others rise, you rise too, in character, in reputation, and in the fulfillment that comes from knowing you made a difference. Steve Wozniak's quiet $10 million gift continues to inspire generations of entrepreneurs to build companies with heart and to lead with generosity. Now let's learn how Larry Ellison turned $400 a month into a $400 billion empire. Larry Ellison went from dropping out of college twice, being rejected by over 30 tech companies, including NASA, and earning just $400 a month working as a programmer, to co-founding Oracle and building it into a $922 billion top player in software, making him one of the richest people in the world with a net worth of around $393 billion. Larry Ellison was born in 1944 in New York City. His mother died when he was just 9, so he grew up with his aunt in Chicago. Money was tight, and as a teenager, Larry worked small jobs delivering newspapers, washing dishes, and mowing lawns just to help pay for school. In 1962, Larry went to college at the University of Chicago, but he dropped out. He felt the classes didn't teach him the practical skills that he wanted. A few years later, he tried again at the University of Illinois, but he dropped out a second time because he realized he could learn more about computers on his own. And by the late 1960s, Larry was working as a programmer, earning just $400 a month. He applied to over 30 tech companies, including NASA, but was rejected by all of them. Most companies turned him down because he didn't have a college degree and had very little work experience. Larry felt frustrated and discouraged, but he didn't give up. He spent every free hour learning about computers and teaching himself how to code. He wanted to build something big. In 1977, Larry co-founded Oracle, originally called Software Development Laboratories, with a small team and a tiny investment. They worked long hours in a tiny office, coding software that could help companies organize and manage their data. At first, people doubted him. Investors said, databases are too complicated, you'll never sell this, and no one will pay for software like yours. The big break for him came in the early 1980s when IBM decided to try Oracle's database software for one of their projects. IBM's decision proved that Oracle software worked, and soon other companies started using it too. That first major client launched Oracle's growth, and the company quickly became a leading player in the software world. Today, Oracle's market value is around $922 billion, and Larry Ellison is one of the richest people in the world with a net worth of approximately $393 billion, briefly overtaking Elon Musk as the world's richest person in 2025. Larry's story shows that even when money is tight, doors keep closing and people doubt you. Learning every day, working harder than anyone else, and believing in your idea can take you all the way to the top. Humble beginnings in Chicago. Larry Ellison was born in 1944 in New York City to a young single mother. As a child, he nearly died of pneumonia, and his mother felt she couldn't raise him. She gave him up for adoption to her aunt and uncle in Chicago. Larry grew up on Chicago's South Side in a modest 2-bedroom apartment as part of a working-class family. Money was tight, and as a teenager, Larry worked small jobs, delivering newspapers, washing dishes, mowing lawns, just to help pay for school. Ellison's adoptive father, Louis, had lost his fortune in the Great Depression and was a harsh, unsupportive figure in his life. In fact, as Larry later recalled, his dad repeatedly told him he was good for nothing. Imagine hearing that as a child. It could crush anyone's spirit. But for Larry, his father's constant put-downs lit a fire inside him. If fire doesn't destroy you, you're tempered by it. Thanks, Dad, Larry said later, believing that his father's tough treatment actually forged his resilience. Now, despite all of the problems at home, Larry was a smart kid. He loved math and science and showed an independent, rebellious streak from early on. He refused to simply go along with things that didn't make sense to him, which was a trait that would both get him into trouble as a student and serve him well as an entrepreneur later. Dropping out twice. In 1962, Larry Ellison left Chicago to attend the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. He did brilliantly in subjects that he was interested in. He even was named Science Student of the Year in his first year. But in his sophomore year, tragedy struck. His adoptive mother, who had been the source of warmth and support in his life, died suddenly. Heartbroken and grieving, Larry couldn't face his final exams and dropped out of college. A few months later, he tried to restart college at the University of Chicago. This is where Larry first encountered computers and programming, and it fascinated him. However, he stayed at Chicago for only one term before dropping out a second time. Why leave again so soon? Partly because Larry realized the classes weren't teaching him the practical skills that he craved, and partly because his independent streak made it hard for him to sit through courses that he just didn't find useful. As he later admitted, I never accepted conventional wisdom. It got me in terrible trouble in a school system that tries to get you to conform, especially since he only wanted to study what truly interested him. Dropping out twice earned Larry a lot of criticism. Friends and family were concerned he was going nowhere. His father even declared that Larry would never amount to anything. It's hard to imagine a bigger emotional low point. By his early 20s, Larry had no degree, no plan, and the people around him pretty much had written him off. But Larry was about to prove them all wrong in his own way. Bouncing between jobs and learning to code. So after leaving college in 1966, Larry Ellison packed his belongings into his car and drove to California in search of opportunity. He arrived in Berkeley with barely any money, just enough for some fast food and a few tanks of gas. The Silicon Valley tech boom hadn't fully started yet, and Larry's resume didn't really look that impressive. He had no degrees and only odd jobs on it. So he spent the next 8 years hopping between jobs just to make ends meet. He worked as a technician for companies like Fireman's Fund and Wells Fargo Bank, and eventually as a programmer at Amdahl Corporation. These were humble positions. In one early programming gig, Larry earned only about $400 a month, barely enough to live on. During this period, though, Larry often applied for better programming jobs. He reportedly tried at dozens of tech companies, even NASA, but got rejection letter after rejection letter. Why? Most companies didn't want to hire a college dropout with only a little bit of formal experience. It's a situation that many people fear. You know you have potential, but on paper, you just don't check the right boxes and nobody will give you a chance. Still, Ellison refused to give up on tech. He taught himself to code, staying up late reading technical books and manuals. In fact, Larry never took a single formal computer science class, yet he became a proficient programmer just through self-study. As he later said, I never took a computer science class in my life. I got a job working as a programmer. I was largely self-taught. I just picked up a book and started programming. This ability to lean into self-learning is one of the key themes of Larry's rise to fame. Even when employers wouldn't give him a chance, he kept kept improving his skills on his own. And by the mid-1970s, Larry finally landed a solid programming job at a company called Ampex. There, he got to work on a project that would change his life. One of his assignments was building a special database system for the CIA, codenamed Oracle. At Ampex, Larry worked under a talented engineer named Bob Miner, and they were later joined by another colleague, Ed Oates. The three of them often brainstormed about big ideas and even dreamed of starting a company together someday. Building Oracle, the leap of faith. In 1977, Larry Ellison was around 33 years old and decided it was now or never. Time to start that company. He teamed up with Bob Miner and Ed Oates, the colleagues that he trusted, and co-founded a small startup called Software Development Laboratories, SDL. They had almost no money. The total investment was just $2,000, and $1,200 of it came out of Larry's own pockets. In other words, they started Oracle on roughly the price of a secondhand used car. They didn't even have a real office at first, just a tiny space where they squeezed in and coded for long hours. But Larry had a clear vision. He was inspired by a research paper by IBM engineer Edgar F. Codd about a new way to organize data called relational databases. The big established companies like IBM didn't think Codd's ideas had commercial potential, but Larry disagreed. He saw an opportunity to beat the giants at their own game by building a simple, powerful database software based on this relational model. Their first contract as a company was a lucky break. They won a deal to build a database management system for the CIA. The same project Larry had worked on at Ampex, codenamed Oracle. The CIA became Oracle's first customer, giving the tiny startup a critical early revenue stream. Larry and his team worked constantly and finished the project ahead of schedule. And using the spare time, they turned the CIA system into a commercial product that any company could use. They decided to name their product Oracle after the project and eventually even renamed the company Oracle Systems Corporation in 1983. But those early years were anything but easy. Imagine being a small startup trying to sell a complex database system in the late 1970s. Many people thought Larry's ideas were super far-fetched. Critics and potential investors told him things like, databases are too complicated, you'll never sell this, and no one will ever pay money for software like this. Others flat out said, you can't compete with IBM. They're too big. Larry Ellison heard all of this negativity on a regular basis. It's a classic story of a disruptor that nobody believes at first. At one point, Oracle was so small that when they needed to connect their computer terminal to a main system in another room and a wall was in the way, Larry literally smashed the hole through the wall with a hammer to run the cable. He wasn't about to let anything, not even a wall, slow him down. This find a way or make one attitude defined Oracle's culture in the early days. Facing doubt and failure. Despite the doubters, Ellison and his co-founders, they kept pushing forward. They truly believed in their idea when almost no one else did. In 1979, they released the first version of the Oracle database software, and in a fun move, they called it Oracle version 2. There was never a version 1 to give the customers the impression that the product was already mature and tested. The software was good, but convincing companies to try a product from an unknown startup was still a pretty steep uphill battle. The turning point for them came in the early 1980s. In 1981, the tech giant IBM decided to give Oracle a try for one of its big projects. This was exactly the break Larry had been waiting for. Oracle's databases worked brilliantly for IBM, and seeing Big Blue, which was IBM's nickname, use this little company's product made other businesses take Oracle seriously. After IBM adopted Oracle, the company's sales started doubling every year for 7 years straight. Oracle went from 8 employees in 1980 to hundreds of employees and a public stock offering by 1986. The doubters were proven wrong. Customers would pay for this software, and Oracle could compete with and even help the likes of big companies like IBM. However, success didn't mean smooth sailing. Oracle grew very fast, but it almost collapsed in 1990 due to its own mistakes. The company's young sales team had been so aggressive in booking sales that they started counting deals that hadn't materialized yet, essentially overstating revenues. And when some of those deals fell through, Oracle suddenly had to announce losses and its stock price plummeted. In fact, Oracle's market value dropped about 80%, and it was on the verge of bankruptcy. Can you imagine? Larry Ellison, after a decade of grinding to build his dream, nearly saw all of it slip away. That crisis was a huge test for Larry and Oracle, and many thought the company was done for. but Larry refused to quit. He later admitted Oracle had made an incredible business mistake. He responded by completely overhauling the company's management and hiring more experienced executives to straighten things out. Larry also personally doubled down on improving the product. His team released Oracle version 7 in 1992, which became a game changer that put the company back on top. By the mid-1990s, Oracle was not only saved, it was dominating the database market again. Through all these ups and downs, Larry Ellison's intensity and determination never seemed to waver. People who work for him often described him as having this unbelievable drive. His first wife, Ada Quinn, recalled that Larry had incredible intelligence applied with incredible intensity, and that his drive does not let up. That intensity is what carried Oracle through all of these hard times. Triumph at the top. Fast forward to today, and Oracle is a titan of the tech industry. The company that started in a tiny office with 3 people is now a global enterprise software leader worth nearly $922 billion in market value. Oracle's technology is behind thousands of businesses, government agencies, and websites around the world. And Larry Ellison himself, he's now 81 years old and still actively involved in Oracle as the executive chairman and chief technology officer. He's achieved a level of success that few can imagine. In fact, in 2025, Larry briefly became the richest person in the world, even surpassing Elon Musk for a short period, with an estimated net worth of around $393 billion. Yes, that's billion with a B. Even if stock prices fluctuate and he's currently the second richest, it's a mind-boggling turnaround for someone who once struggled just to pay rent. With his fortune, Larry Ellison has bought all the toys and trophies that you might expect from a billionaire. He owns 98% of a specific Hawaiian island. He has a fleet of fancy cars and private jets. He has mansions around the world, and even a championship-winning America's Cup sailing team. The kid from the south side of Chicago who mowed lawns for pocket change can now literally own an island and sail his own mega yacht. It's pretty fair to say that he proved his adoptive father wrong. But beyond the luxury, Larry also had become a figure of influence. He stepped down as Oracle's CEO in 2014, making room for new leadership, but he continues to help shape the company's direction in technology. He's also a major philanthropist. He gives hundreds of millions to medical research and educational causes. Lessons from Larry's journey. Larry Ellison's rise from poverty and rejection to massive success offers some pretty valuable lessons for anyone with a dream. Number 1, believe in yourself. Larry had this unshakable confidence in his vision, even when other people doubted him. He didn't let those rejections define his self-worth. Next, keep learning and improving. When he couldn't get a formal education in what he loved, he taught himself. That self-education and constant learning were the keys to his later success. Next, persevere through setbacks. Ellison faced personal loss, academic failure, job rejections, and near business bankruptcy. And each time, he chose to get back up again. Psychologists call this quality grit, and research suggests that perseverance can be as crucial to high achievement as talent or IQ. Next, take smart risks. Dropping out of college, moving cross-country, starting the company on a shoestring, those are some pretty bold risks. Larry bet on himself and wasn't afraid to leave the safe path. And lastly, use doubters as motivation. Instead of letting criticism discourage him, Larry used it as motivation. Every "you'll never make it" pushed him to work even harder to prove them wrong. Larry Ellison's story shows that even when money is tight, doors keep closing, and people doubt you, it's possible to climb to the very, very top through daily learning, relentless hard work, and a belief in your vision. He turned obstacles into opportunities at every single step. So as you reflect on Larry Ellison's journey, think about your own challenges. What would happen if you refused to give up, no matter what the odds? If this self-made billionaire taught us anything, it's that sometimes the greatest successes come from those who don't follow traditional rules, those who carve their own path and persevere when everyone else expects them to fail. To learn Warren Buffett's mindset that took him from $38 to $150 billion, check the video right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there. At just 11 years old, Warren Buffett made his first stock purchase. It was 1942, and young Buffett spent $38 per share on 3 shares of a company called Cities Service.